The obsidian plate recovered from the Shacklethorne auction told a story. It was a tale of kings, giants, and gods, not thieves. Yet with Bain, a watcher back at the helm, the Payday gang had all they'd need to save the world from the tyranny the dentist dreamed up. A common band of thieves protecting America from itself. The warning the plate echoed was etched into the minds of the entire gang as they went their separate ways to eliminate the final pawns of the Kataru. It hummed with the same tune which rang out in Duke's head, passed down in his family for generations. It was the key to the plate, which itself helped. With the ancient temples being prized open and Bain on death's door, it was now or never. Hitting the White House was the only option. This is the final story of Payday. With the serum gradually shutting down Bain's body, he was no longer able to walk, and was fading fast. The old mastermind was starting to obsess over his plan to lift the burden of past mistakes from his crew's shoulders. Whilst worldwide, the fight against the dentist's allies raged on, in DC, it was at a standstill. The Dreaming Temple was already open, but a White House approach seemed impossible. That was when Duke found it. Listen, it's important you understand this. The dentist, he's no mere man. In this life, he's a practicing dental surgeon, Dr. Hellman, but that's the key. In this life. What did he say back at Hell's Island?
When you've been around for a while, you learn to let things go. See the bigger picture.
He's been a thorn in the side of Lindenhurst long before Duke, who coveted the diamond, the lament, and was always found where the Nephilim could be traced. Duke. Hellman is the healer. A Kataru king, but the healer hasn't always been Hellman. He's been around as long as the Kataru have existed, and the clues are there in broad daylight. You just have to see it. The power he's seeking is reincarnation. That's what the lament is. Once you understand this, you'll understand why he can't afford to succeed. Look at history. He's done this before. Always been there, from Franklin to Himmler. He commands the Nephilim and changes the world in his own image. Civil wars, genocides. Now he's after the most powerful office in the world. Just flee into hiding, stopping him in the time was right. Locke had been tracking the dentist's movements by hacking into the personal computer of the investigative journalist, Rachel Riggs. She'd been given her own reasons to suspect Hellman was involved in recent events, and had the resources to follow his progress. It appeared he was getting impatient playing the puppet master, as he began to appear at White House conferences within the president's inner circle. With his allies across the world disappearing, and Kento's death proof that murky water was at their limit, this was his gambit, weaving what was left of his military force into the presidential entourage. News came through from Locke that the dentist was now on his way back from Egypt. The Temple of Cheops, the Great Pyramid, was the second he'd opened. The telltale radiation of a supposed nuclear detonation was the sign. The dentist was halfway there, but with Simmons pulling all the strings he could to get his travel to Iraq denied, Washington would be his next destination, surely. This was their chance for an in-person confrontation. But before they could make their move, a breaking news broadcast informed the world a spike of radiation was confirmed in the DC area. Air Force One was down. The president, attempting to flee the capital, was missing in the wreckage. The dentist's plans were unfurling faster than anticipated. However, this chaos provided an opportunity for Bain to take his boys to the White House and wipe their slate clean. The objective was to locate for themselves, and to find and steal long-rumoured to exist presidential pardons so the crew's old crimes against the nation could be wiped from history. It was rumoured that there were 24 pardons, signed for the end of the Civil War by Abraham Lincoln, but assigned no names for which to pardon. These pardons couldn't be destroyed once ratified, so had been held in a secure vault deep within the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. They were the thief's holy grail. No matter the crime, once your name was written into the pardon, any charges against you would be absolved. A blank slate. The one thing that could buy a return to normalcy for the Payday gang. This was Bain's last job. It was all he'd thought about at the Hell's Island facility, and he knew, as his time ran out, So did his crews. Assuming the role of Bain for one final time, with Locke as his mouthpiece, it was time to pull off
the greatest heist of all.
Although there were contingencies in place for a loud assault on the now more sparsely populated White House grounds, it was in everyone's best interest to keep things silent. With Kento gone, the Murky Water operatives answered to the dentist, who had called them away from their foreign wars to defend the temples. Capitol Hill was encircled by the finest Murkies in the company. As such, a disguised infiltration was the best the crew could hope for. Locke had been doing that for years. He dusted off his finest Murky Water outfits to send the crew in with a chance of entry without detection. This wasn't a crime net job anymore, it was entirely personal, with Locke flying the chopper for both infiltration and extraction. Stepping out of the helo, the four who'd started the saga of the Payday gang would also be the four to end it. Acting as high-ranking operational reinforcements to the White House garrison, they strolled straight into the historic building, avoiding cursory glances from the other mercs who might see through their disguise. Once in, it was up to Hawks to mask up and find a way into the Peoc. Step 1 was gaining access to the Oval Office. They first found the radio frequency identification pad, which, with a bit of tinkering, gave away the wired LED combination which controlled the system. By matching these lights to the colour of linked wires from cable boxes around the building, they could cut the connection and make the RFID scanner open to any frequency card. This was all information Bain had scouted years back when the White House heist first entered into his plans. What he hadn't anticipated back then was the alarmingly high Secret Service presence in the White House interior, seemingly bolstered by the dentist's own forces. Obviously, he'd used his influence over the 46th president to make sure security was tight around the Peoc. The intel that Joy had gathered indicated that the Peoc entrance keycard would be stored within a safe found somewhere in the Oval Office. As it was the only way through meters of thick concrete, they went after the safe, finding it hidden behind a painting in the office itself. Fitted with the Franz Jaeger Mark II system, Hawks had to find a combination to this safe to avoid the loud approach. Bain had planned for this possibility, suggesting via Locke that they hack into the hurriedly abandoned laptops left by presidential aides to the White House after the reported leak. From their lax security communications, the crew came upon a USB, which stored the code to the safe. With the Peoc keycard now in hand, the team regrouped at the East Hall to infiltrate the hidden bunker of the White House together. They found it, as Bain had predicted, hidden behind a mechanical bookshelf mechanism. The entrance to the Peoc was built like a modern air raid shelter, amongst the ornate scenery of the White House itself. An airlock before a steep descent into the nerve center of the US machine. Glancing around the vast communications center, again they were joined by high-ranking Secret Service members who were best subdued before proceeding with the vault. There was a briefing room to the left, inside of which the painting of Mick. But it was the vault that Bain was after. Locke had Joy look into this prior to the operation. This was one of the toughest vaults the gang had ever faced, the Kitaru-designed TK model. This time though, they didn't have access to liquid nitrogen or C4, so she deduced the only way in was by manually hacking the computer system and operating the door's controls. A lengthy and nerve-wracking process, but not beyond the old South African's capabilities, who was able to access and eventually open the final vault. Inside were the most precious goods the gang had ever had the chance to pilfer. The 4 filled bags with the 24 pardons, 150 years spent waiting for a purpose. Their prize secured, Locke was alarmed to hear the situation was rapidly evolving. Something had changed. US fighter jets were being ordered to the capital. The president was still missing, but someone had taken charge, and that someone was now powerful enough to rain down the full force of US military power onto the heads of his eternal enemies. Still cased in the murky clothing, the 4 fled to Locke and Bain's chopper as they circled around for the hurried pickup. The DC airspace was no longer safe, but the final job was complete. Bain, through heaved breaths, congratulated the crew on their final job. From the First World Bank to the White House, a meteoric rise of legend. It was impossible to place a numerical value on their freedom, the chance to leave the world of crime and return to a civilian life. It was all they could ask for after the harrowing months prior, losing Bain and Jiro, his own son. This was the real Payday and was always Bain's planned out. Change the world, force America to see the corruption they were at the mercy of, and disappear without a trace. In his final moments though, it hit him. They'd failed. The world was changing, but not for the better. Cagliostro's guide had sucked him in, a solution to the issues of modern day through the secrets of the past. But he'd been blind and simply opened the gates of power to those who'd misuse it. Even with the immunity a pardon offered, his fading thoughts came to the realization, how could they ever be safe whilst the Kataru lived on? Bain died knowing that Duke had seen the bigger picture all along. He'd been blinded by his past mistakes and guilt. The incident was reported by the vestiges of the Payday task force as the world reeled from the events of the past week. The Payday gang attempted to use the world crisis as an opportunity to enter and steal something from the White House. The audacity of their actions is remarkable even for the Payday gang. It was also to be their downfall. Working with well-coordinated surveillance and tactics teams, the clowns were intercepted and successfully stopped. In the brief firefight that ensued, all present members of the gang were killed. Payday mastermind Bain, in a break from his usual MO, is confirmed to have taken part in the operation, and his body has been identified as one of those dead. Subsequent arrests were made to bring in the rest of the gang, effectively ending their reign of crime. Of course, none of this was true. By stealing the pardons, the gang were making an implicit peace offering, which the Washington PD and what was left of Garrett's broken and corrupt task force couldn't refuse. By proclaiming them dead, law enforcement was acknowledging the pardons and praying that the gang's newfound legal reprieve would signal the end of their criminal days. They wouldn't have to worry. The Payday gang were willing to follow through with the ceasefire, retire after all they'd earned. But deep down, Duke also knew there'd be shadows chasing them for the rest of their lives. In any case, Lot flew them directly out of the state and the country. The plan was to rendezvous with the other four-man squad sent across the world at the Silk Road team's base of operations, somewhere in Mexico. Whilst they'd all succeeded in their own individual campaigns, there'd be no celebrations for a job well done. Bain's death was inevitable, but somehow actually seeing him gone cemented the reality that the Payday gang was also no more. He was to be laid to rest alongside his legacy. They dug a grave not only for Bain, but for the gang's identities, discarding their mask to be buried alongside the man who'd earned them their notoriety. The end of an era. Time to go their separate ways. Dallas alone hesitated, hanging on to the mask that had been his life's purpose for almost a decade. He remembered how it resembled those they'd found in Henry's Rock, crumbling like they'd spent years underground. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was repeating a mistake from long ago. Could this have all gone differently? Glancing up at Locke, the veteran mercenary gave him a knowing nod. It was over. Time to let go and start anew. Is this how it all played out? History doomed to repeat itself? Or is this just what the powers that be would have you believe? Maybe there's more to the story than this. Maybe the for the gang heralded a new... Maybe the greatest heist of all was about stealing back freedom for more than just themselves.
When I was a child, my mother used to hum this melody to me. I remember her saying something about it being the oldest tune.